Boundaries are not fences. They are psychological perimeters that define your self-worth, your emotional availability, and your tolerance for disrespect. The sophisticated manipulator rarely launches a frontal assault on these limits. Instead, they deploy a series of subversive, calculated maneuvers designed to test your perimeter's strength, identify its weaknesses, and ultimately erode your capacity to defend yourself. These are not acts of aggression. They are acts of reconnaissance. By recognizing these four subtle yet devastating tests, you gain the power to stop the invasion before it even begins. This is about psychological defense, turning their test into an instant, non-negotiable failure. Number 1. The probing confession. The first subtle maneuver is the probing confession. This tactic is designed to trick you into revealing your deep personal boundaries and sensitive psychological triggers under the guise of shared vulnerability. The manipulator approaches you with an air of sudden, intense intimacy, offering a calculated revelation about themselves, a private weakness, a moral dilemma, or a deeply personal secret. This confession is not for connection. It is a trap of reciprocity. The psychological function is to activate your sense of social obligation. You feel compelled to reciprocate the perceived vulnerability, believing that this intense sharing signals a new level of trust and emotional closeness. In reality, the manipulator is merely using their own slightly uncomfortable truth as a lure to extract your most protected, useful information. They aren't confessing their weakness. They are probing for yours. For example, a manipulator might share a story about a time they overreacted to a minor slight from a colleague, describing their rage in detail, and then ask, "Have you ever been blindsided like that? What makes you truly snap?" If you reveal that you cannot tolerate being ignored, or that you react explosively to accusations of incompetence, you have just handed them the keys to your emotional control room. They now know exactly which buttons to press and which boundaries can be pushed to elicit your desired, predictable response. The defense against the probing confession is absolute emotional opacity. Acknowledge their share. Offer a neutral platitude, but never match their vulnerability. Keep your perimeter invisible. Number 2. The micro-violation drift. The second test is arguably the most common and devastating. The micro-violation drift. This tactic relies on the principle of gradual, almost imperceptible boundary erosion. The manipulator begins with a series of minor, seemingly forgivable infractions against your established limits. They are testing the resilience of your perimeter with small taps, not a direct hit. These micro-violations are so small that challenging them feels disproportionate, even petty. They might be 5 minutes late to every meeting, only to apologize profusely with an excuse that tugs at your sympathy. They might constantly borrow small amounts of money without paying it back until you have to ask. They might interrupt your conversations repeatedly, only to excuse it as enthusiasm. Each individual act is a trivial offense, but the cumulative effect is catastrophic. The psychological goal is normalization. By forcing you to forgive and tolerate these constant minor offenses, the manipulator is training your subconscious mind to accept disrespect as the new baseline for the relationship. They condition you to believe that the friction of confronting them is worse than the discomfort of tolerating the violation. Once these small acts are normalized, the manipulator can easily shift to larger, more impactful violations. Major time demands, significant resource extractions, or outright emotional abuse, because your self-defense mechanism has been systematically fatigued. The only defense against the micro-violation drift is zero tolerance for small acts of disrespect. Address the 5-minute tardiness with the same calm firmness you would address an hour-long delay, thereby preventing the normalization of their contempt. Number 3. The unilateral assumption. The third maneuver, the unilateral assumption, is a strategy of forcing psychological complicity by presenting an untested boundary violation as an already agreed-upon fact. The manipulator never asks permission to cross a limit. They simply proceed as if the crossing is a pre-approved, non-negotiable reality of the relationship. This often involves logistical or relational boundary shifts. For instance, they might send a text message stating, I'll be at your house at 6 a.m. tomorrow to get your help with the move. I know you're an early bird. Or, in a professional context, I've already told the client you'll handle the weekend support calls as you're the best person for this. The psychological genius of the unilateral assumption is that it places the burden of correction entirely on you. To reestablish your limit, you are forced into an aggressive, confrontational position. You must actively interrupt an assumed existing plan. The manipulator gambles on your natural aversion to conflict and the powerful human tendency to avoid rocking the boat once a plan seems to be in motion. If you hesitate, if you express discomfort but fail to immediately and decisively veto the assumption, your silence is automatically interpreted as consent. Your compliance is manufactured by your inertia. The counter strategy requires a firm, immediate rejection of the premise, not just the request. You must state, "No, that plan was created without my consent. That is not my availability, and I will not be doing that." You reject the assumption, not just the action. Number 4, the future promise trap. The final test, the future promise trap, is deployed when a manipulator needs immediate, difficult compliance, but cannot offer a legitimate, current incentive. Instead, they leverage your most desired goals, hopes, and expectations to secure your obedience in the present. They don't test your boundaries with confrontation, they test them with seduction and false hope. This involves making large, vague, and highly attractive promises of future rewards in exchange for a costly sacrifice right now. In a professional context, a boss might demand 6 weeks of uncompensated overtime, stating, "If you pull this off for me, I promise you, I will make sure you are in the running for that promotion next quarter. You'll be the first on the list." In a relationship, I know I've been difficult lately, but if you just stick with me through this one rough patch, I promise our relationship will be completely different. We'll finally have that stable life we talked about. The trap is built on contingency. Your current sacrifice is made contingent upon an entirely unsecured future event. The manipulator knows that hope is a powerful motivator. By offering a fantasy of the future you desire, they effectively disarm your ability to enforce your present boundaries. They test your limit by seeing how much you are willing to invest in an unverified future payoff. The true cost of the future promise trap is that the future promise rarely, if ever, materializes. The defense is simple. Never trade current tangible boundaries for vague future promises. Demand the promotion, the stability, or the compensation now as a prerequisite for the sacrifice, or simply refuse to negotiate your current self-worth for their future fantasy by identifying and neutralizing the probing confession, the micro-violation drift, the unilateral assumption, and the future promise trap. You protect the perimeter of your psychological well-being, ensuring that the limits you establish are never, under any circumstance, negotiable.